Cyberpunk, The Flame That Remains. Written and read by Ethan Taplin. Chapter 16. Hunger Without End. Night City, 2075. Liv's boots hit the deck hard with every step. Pain pulsed up her side from the wound Navarro had stitched, but she didn't falter. The deck of the Naglfar felt too empty, too open. At first she'd thought the fog clinging to the ship was simply obscuring the crew, but no, they weren't there at all. Just her, Astrid, and Mael. Mael was running barefoot. He'd discarded the shredded remains of his shoes on the speedboat before they followed Sophie and Ares through the hole they'd made. The other two had vanished into the dark, unpowered bowels, while Liv and her companions had found a stairwell that took them right up to the deck. Somewhere down there, Sophie and Ares were carving their way deeper into the belly of the beast. Up here, the top deck led only to the bridge. Their path was clear. "They've left the gate open," Astrid said, "but we are not welcome guests." Liv's grip tightened on her pistol as they neared the steps that rose toward the bridge tower. Her side burned. She ignored it and kept walking. They were about 100 feet from the steps when Mael skidded to a halt. Liv and Astrid followed suit. Stepping out from the shadow of the tower was Freya. Her silhouette was jagged now, uneven. The left side of her body bore brutal mechanical reinforcement, a jagged outcrop of exposed servos in her chest, thick composite muscle in her side, and reinforced plating up her arm and shoulder. She looked like she'd been torn apart and rebuilt in anger. She locked eyes with Liv, her optic implants shining red through the choppy mess of dark hair that hung in front of her face. "Where is she?" Freya barked. "Where is Muspelheim?" Liv didn't answer. "I owe her," Freya spat, raising the mangled bulk of her left hand. "She took this from me. I'll return the favor." Her voice cracked with fury, but her body didn't shake. Her posture was perfectly still, eerily so. She turned her gaze on Astrid. "And you should have killed me when you had the chance. That little mercy play back in the city, you'll regret it." Astrid said nothing. "But you," Freya's voice dropped into a growl as she turned back to Liv, stepping forward now, footfalls echoing unevenly against the deck. "You're the worst of them. You ran. Sophie took my hand and ran, and you ran with her. You left me with nothing but a scrap heap and a bloody medkit." Her breathing had become audible. It was arrhythmic and heavy. Her metal arm twitched at her side, fingers tightening with a slow, unnatural crawl. Her optics flicked back and forth between Liv and her siblings, pulsing with red light. Liv realized now what she was seeing. The signs weren't subtle anymore. They were loud and terrifying. Freya had fallen over the edge, and she didn't even know it. Her boots scraped forward another step. Astrid tilted her head slightly. Her expression was hard to read, but to Liv it seemed mournful. When she spoke, her voice was chilling and quiet, but it resonated like the toll of a distant bell. "The roots of Yggdrasil bleed," she said, "and the hound at Hell's Gate stirs. You've crossed the bridge, sister. There is no return from this shore, nor the feasting maw of Nidhogger." Freya didn't hesitate. She snarled and lunged forward. But Mael moved first. Barefoot and silent, he surged across the deck in a blur, chrome talons raking up sparks as he closed the distance. His shoulder hit Freya in the side just as she raised her arm to strike. The blow carried the full weight of his augmented body, knocking her back a full meter before she caught herself. She skidded on the steel plating with a shriek of metal, the claws of her right hand gouging lines into the deck. Her movements were jagged, too fast, twitching at the edges, telltale signs of overclocked reflexes and an unstable feedback loop. Liv didn't need a scan to know what she was seeing. Freya didn't stop. Even with Mael's hit, she twisted mid-skid and launched herself forward, bearing down on him with a guttural sound that wasn't entirely human. Her claws slashed out in a calculated, practiced motion. He blocked the first strike with a forearm, the claws sparking against his armor. He ducked under the second swing, narrowly avoiding her scrap metal fist. He reeled back at the third strike, though. Freya's claws tore across his side in a spray of blood. Liv raised her pistol and opened fire. The first round hit its mark, but Freya didn't flinch. Her metal shoulder absorbed the impact with a sharp jerk, but she kept advancing. The second shot glanced off the plating at her elbow. The third struck her in the thigh, staggering her for a moment, just long enough for Astrid to make her move. She came in low and fast, one hand slicing forward in a brutal strike to Freya's ribs, while the other reached for a pressure point in her leg. Freya twisted and struck back hard with a snarl, catching Astrid across the face with her left arm. The impact sounded like metal slamming into concrete. Astrid reeled, blood smeared her cheek, and her lip had split open. But she didn't fall. Liv fired again. Mael was back on his feet by then, rushing Freya from behind. He leaped and slammed into her spine with both feet, cybernetic talons piercing into the heavy armor plates at her lower back. She howled in pain, wrenching around with an unnatural speed, and flinging him off. He hit the deck and skidded, chest heaving, but he didn't stop moving. Freya lunged toward Astrid next, rage flashing in her eyes, the kind that buried reason. Astrid dodged the first blow, but caught the second in the shoulder. A sickening crunch echoed across the deck. She dropped to one knee, but not before lodging her knife in Freya's thigh. "She's not responding to pain," Liv shouted. "We have to break her cyberware." She holstered her gun, reaching for the collapsible baton at her belt, and advanced. The deck was chaos. Freya struck like a predator, her movements jittery and erratic, but effective. The plating in her limbs flexed with every step, joints overclocked, servos whining. Liv swung her baton into Freya's shoulder. The metal rang out, jarring her arm, but the strike forced Freya's torso to twist. Mael took hold of the opportunity. He swept low and kicked her in the knee. The leg buckled. Astrid, limping but steady, drove a blade through a silver seam under Freya's clavicle. Sparks erupted as she forced the knife into her cyberware, and Freya screamed. She retaliated wildly, throwing Astrid off her and across the deck. Liv tried to press the attack, but a backhand from Freya's brutal, monstrous left arm caught her across the ribs and sent her sprawling. Mael leapt again, clawed feet flashing, but Freya caught him mid-air. Her fingers wrapped around one ankle before she slammed him into the deck, then knelt down and raised her arm. Her fist struck down once, twice, metal against bone. The second hit cracked something. He went still. Astrid roared, a sound Liv had never heard from her before and never wished to again, and surged into Freya, blade in one hand, something else in the other, a syringe she must have taken from Navarro's clinic. She stabbed both into Freya's side, then drove her foot into her gut, sending her a step back. Liv dragged herself up. Her baton was gone, but it didn't matter. She wasn't going after Freya this time. She rolled under a wild swing of Freya's clawed hand and grabbed Mael. He coughed as she quickly dragged him away from the fight. Astrid's eyes flashed as she deftly avoided Freya's attacks. She stepped past each swipe as though she knew where they would fall, which of course, Liv realized, she did. Heimdall had finally joined the fight. Liv withdrew an air hypo, a high-speed injection pen, from a pouch at her hip. She jammed the injector into Mael's thigh and pressed the button. Mael gasped for air as the combat stim flooded his system with a cocktail of painkillers, rejuvenants, and adrenaline. He was back on his feet in seconds, blood pouring from his nose and seeping into his clothes from somewhere under his shirt, but he paid the red no mind. Liv pulled another air hypo canister from her pocket, ejecting the spent tube from the injector, and replacing it in a single, fluid motion. She jammed the needle into her own thigh and repeated the process with hands ever steady, despite the rush of adrenaline. Astrid was trading blows with Freya, slashing, stabbing, and dodging with perfect timing. Her eyes shone with golden light as she calmly sidestepped a blow that rent a deep gash in the exterior wall of the bridge tower. She stuck one knife in Freya's ribs, leaving it as she ducked under another wild swing. She withdrew another stolen syringe from her pocket and jammed it into Freya's thigh as she retrieved the knife she'd embedded in the same leg earlier in the fight. Freya was beginning to slow. Her movements grew sluggish as Astrid kept her distracted and burned through her energy reserves. Mael and Liv charged in as Astrid weaved past another attack and retrieved her second knife. Mael leapt over Freya's metal arm as she lurched forward. His clawed foot raked down across her chest, tearing through armor and bone. Astrid landed a third stab with a syringe. Liv drew her pistol and slid across the deck, coming to a stop just between Freya's feet, lying on her back and pointing the gun at Freya's chest. She squeezed the trigger and scrambled out of the way. Freya fell hard. She was still twitching, her bloodied face still contorted into a grim snarl, even as the red light behind her eyes flickered and faded. But she was still breathing. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the ocean and the wind howling faintly over the open deck. Liv dropped to one knee, panting. Mael leaned against the outer wall of the bridge tower, pressing a firm hand into his bleeding side. Astrid just stared at Freya's crumpled form. The golden light faded from her eyes as she spoke. "The worm did not devour you in anger, only hunger. I'm sorry, sister, that we were too late to stop it." Once Liv had tended to the worst of their wounds, they turned toward the bridge and began to climb the stairs. There was still work to do.